folks. Thanks for tuning in. I get the privilege of interviewing Phil Muscatello today, who runs the fantastic podcast YouTube channels called Shares for Beginners. Phil and I have had some great chats over the years. We're both very passionate about investing, and in particular, helping people learn about investing and share investing and so forth. So, lucky me gets to talk to the master today. How are you going, Phil?
I'm very good, thank you. And I demur on that description of myself as a master because I still consider myself a beginner. And, I bow at the feet of experts like yourself, Simon.
Well, we'll have a good chat no matter what. So, and I think the good starting point would probably be maybe we can talk about some of your favorite investing books. What are your thoughts on that? You've got some ideas?
I do, yes. Now, the first one I wanted to talk about, and it's not one of the first books that I've read, but it's one of my favourite ones. It's called The Ulysses Contract: How to Never Worry About the Share Market Again by Michael Kemp.
Interesting.
Now, I'd highly recommend this book, and I'd highly recommend him as a speaker. Because I interviewed him on the program about the book and read the book, and it's great because I just love a lot of the classical analogies that he puts in there. The idea, of course, of the Ulysses contract is that, unlike Ulysses, you don't want to be tempted by the siren calls of investing mistakes. Ulysses, I think he tied himself to the mast as they sailed past the sirens who are calling out with their temptations to all of the sailors. And it's this kind of attitude that you have to bring to investing. It's a compelling analogy because it teaches discipline, consistency, and patience in investing. And these are core principles for avoiding common pitfalls. And it was also interesting because I'd never met him face to face, because when he came across when I was interviewing him, I thought he seemed like a bit of a grumpy bastard. Sorry, Michael, to say this. But then I met him because he's got a very close association with the Australian Shareholders Association.
I see.
And I met him when he was presenting this year when I was emceeing there, and he's also coming up to Queensland to do that as well. And he's actually, what I've realised, he's very laconic in his sense of humour. He's got a very, very dry sense of humour. But I think it's all about dollar cost averaging. But the one point that he made, which not a lot of books seem to make, is the importance of dividends in the Australian market, because, a lot of people don't understand how important and different dividends are here in Australia. I think we're one of the few countries in the world that has franking credits. And it's also, there's many, many companies, obviously the banks, that pay out a lot of their profits to investors as well. And this can be seen as a problem. I think there's a lot of people who would say the American system's better, where profits are ploughed back into continued growth. But, we have to invest in the market that we're most familiar with.
That we're in, indeed.
Yeah. So have you ever seen that book or come across, Michael?
I've heard about the book, and the concept makes a lot of sense to me. And I think as you say, the takeaway, I think, is to try to automate things potentially, like the dollar cost averaging is a great example, because you're removing those emotional inflection points, right? Where you're doubting yourself, and like Ulysses in the Greek fable about what guardrails or frameworks can you put in place to overcome those behavioral biases that we're all prone to as humans, and obviously therefore as investors. So I think it's a great concept.
Yeah, we'll put a link to the book in the notes as well, so people can follow that up. Okay, well, you've got another question for me.
I do. Get ready, start your engines. So I guess, has there been a book that may have completely changed the way you approach investing or your sort of personal money management, or a pivot at least? Tell me what your thoughts on that one are.
Well, the answer is no. It hasn't been a book that made my pivot. It was actually networking with other investors. And this happened a few years ago before I started the podcast, so it must be about 7 years ago. And that was, first of all, I was a paid subscriber to Stock Doctor. Yeah, Stock Doctor. And what I found I was getting the most value out of was their meetings, their monthly meetings, where I'd sit down with other investors and hear about the way they invested.
Hmm.
It became a bit expensive, so I joined the Australian Shareholders Association. Join now. Anyone who's not a member should be joined now because there's so many benefits for investors and so many learnings. But the main thing was, sorry to put that plug in there, the main thing was that I'd be having these meetings. I went along to I remember vividly going to my first Australian Shareholders Association meeting in the inner west in Sydney, because they've got chapters everywhere and you can go, and you don't
Yep.
even have to be a member, just turn up and
That's great.
and
Community.
take in the knowledge. And that was what really, because you'd see these investors, and let's face it, they're not the youngest of investors, but they're canny old foxes that have been doing it for a long time. And it was just suddenly, that was the pivot for me when I was able to see people who'd been investing for the long term, spending a lot of time thinking about what they were going to put their money in, studying it, like the history of knowledge of CEOs, for example, like someone would talk about a particular company and someone said, I remember 20 years ago when blah, blah was the CEO of that company and he made a complete hash of it. you know what I mean?
Long memories.
Yeah. And then I think this relates back to the Ulysses contract and tying yourself to the mast so you don't make any mistakes, because up until that point, I still had that idea that you have to buy one company which was life-changing. And this is what I find as well when I talk to people, and this is a drum that I bang so many times when people come up to me and say, oh, have you heard about such and such a stock? And I go, what do they do? Do they make any money? Just these basic questions that you need to ask yourself and then find out how are you going to work out whether it is an investment. Because let's face it, there's very, very few companies that are going to outperform the market in the long term.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So, yeah, any edge you can get and any process and discipline is so important. And understanding what they do and how they make money is a great place to start. So that's great. And speaking of understanding, I guess, any books out there or resources you think are overlooked or underrated that, maybe subscribers and listeners should be looking at?
Well, I'm not sure if I'd recommend it for everyone to have a look at, but one that I really enjoy, I'll just get it up now, is see if we can get that in the camera. And I know what we say about technical analysis.
Wow.
This was written in 1932, and this is the Bible, the original Bible of technical analysis. And it's where all of the patterns have been described that you might hear in technical analysis. This is charts, just people who mightn't understand this. This is charts where you'll see the up and down movements, the price action, I think it's called. And
so how does that help investors, Phil? What is it?
Well, I've just got a little piece here that I just wanted to read out. And this, again, is a warning because, like we talk about over and over, people can think that they're better investors than what they are before they lose money and they can completely ruin their investing journey. But this is beware of early presumption. Oh, and the other thing I just wanted to say about this is when you're looking at this, these were done with graph paper and pen and pencil. Wow. These charts are nothing like what we have these days. But
old school.
The very faith in the efficiency of stock charts that leads to an introductory warning against overconfidence and mistrust. There's nothing like the thrill that comes to the beginner when he once commences to master the rudimentary principles of chart reading and sees his first forecast analyses turn out correctly. The great danger for the beginner lies in just this primary awakening to the value of his study. With his first few successes, he's likely to mistake a probable forecast for a certain one, to become overconfident, to overtrade, and suddenly find himself involved in a disastrous quagmire of heavy losses. I love that, a disastrous quagmire of heavy losses. And what's more important, in a hopeless state of indecision, mistrust, skepticism, and bitter disappointment.
What a mess.
I know. I love that.
Yeah, no, I think again, all the tools you can use, right? So if charts help and charting is part of the process, then everything should be on the table. Great, and so that's one for people to think about. And what about books outside the traditional investing realm that might have influenced your outlook or your philosophy as an investor? What can you tell us about that?
I'm a reader. I love reading lots of books, and I find I'll get books where I'm reading about music and how to conduct a symphony, for example, and you you can see that you can use the analogy that a portfolio is like a symphony. Sometimes you want to, emphasize the horns, and then there's other times you want to emphasize the strings. Because a portfolio is like that. It's a dynamic, living thing. But
So
specifically, I
true.
just wanted to recommend another book, and this is let me just get it up here. The Black Swan by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. And do you know this book? Have you heard of Nick?
I've heard of it, yep, and
Yeah.
the point about the blacks. Well, I'll let you tell the story, but yes, I have. It's quite
Okay, so
famous.
the core idea that it's rare, high impact events, black swans
Mm,
can dominate outcomes, and it
mm,
made me rethink risk management because you just don't understand what risk is. And we talk about risk all the time, but
mm,
there is so much risk, and that the resilience of your portfolio needs to reflect risk that can come from any kind of direction. There was a
hmm.
fantastic story I remember in the book, and it was about a casino in Las Vegas and how they insured themselves against risks. And despite all of the risk management they had in place, for example, they had the Lion Taming Act, Siegfried and Roy, and they ensured that the lion would against a lion escaping and mauling someone in the audience, but they didn't insure against the lion actually attacking one of the lion tamers themselves, which happened, and they were killed on stage. We shouldn't laugh about this, but
We shouldn't.
and then the same casino, because in Nevada you've got to make with compliance. There's a lot of information that you've got to provide the gaming board over there,
I can imagine.
and they had one worker who was in charge of this kind of compliance, and instead of sending off the information to the board every month, as he was supposed to do, for some reason, he just put them in a bottom drawer. And no one knew about this. And there was no way to insure against this risk. And so suddenly they were hit a few years later with heavy fines for not sending these sort of things in. So I think the whole point of the book is just understanding risk, and black swans happen because no one can predict anything. And so I think that's another thing, an important lesson for investors is
Mm.
the idea that you can't predict. There's nothing. The future is unpredictable.
Yep, that's so true, so true. And yeah, if the risk was understood, it would be already reflected in prices, and therefore, it's there already. Otherwise, anything, and look at what's happening, I guess, in the Middle East right now. The day that Virgin relists on the stock exchange, it's supposedly the second airline in Australia. The day that it's listing on the stock exchange, half the airspace in the world's been shut down because of a war. Like, if that isn't a red flag of the risks of investing, classic example, right? You just couldn't predict when or how that could happen. So, yeah, I think it comes down to a really robust investment process, and having those books and tools, and the framework to. And again, I think diversification is a core part of that as well. To spread those risks around with what you do have control over. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Diversification, that's one of the main
yeah.
lessons, but not over diversification.
No,
Beware of
yeah.
over diversification as well.
That's right. You have to strike the right balance. So yeah, and I mean that's I guess if you're running a share portfolio, maybe 10 to 15 individual companies, tends to be what we see. But great, yeah, that's so. The Black Swan was that book, wasn't it, by Nicholas Nassim Taleb for people to check out. Great. And then, so how do you balance your reading time between sort of the classics versus up to date current news and maybe new ideas or approaches or books, etc. How do you work through that?
Basically, it's not through books anymore, really. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
on social media. I know a lot of people don't like X, Twitter, whatever, but
Hmm.
I find if you curate your feed, and there's some fantastic investors who post on there all the time, and you can learn
Mm.
so much from them. I think what I'm finding these days is learning more about how the world is changing. There's just 2 points I wanted to make about how the world is changing and my own particular thoughts on it. First is artificial intelligence, because everyone goes, "Oh, how do I invest in artificial intelligence?" And
Mm.
for me, I think artificial intelligence is going to just change so many companies in so many fundamental ways that I think it's more that you've got to look and see how. I think profitability for a lot of companies is going to increase because there's going to be a lot less actual people that are going to be required. I mean, I know for personal experience with a company that I do other work with is that they. I mean, I don't want to go into specifics about it, but it's a legal company, and so much of their processes require trained lawyers
Hmm.
to respond to the work at hand. But I think what's going to happen now is a lot of those people are going to be made redundant because it's very much work that's repeatable, and large language
Mm.
models can do that. So just think about that across the whole of the economy and those kind of
Mm.
changes that are going to happen. And the other thing that I saw the other day, and this is again from an ex post, I can't remember who it was who said it, but in the future, companies are going to be half media companies, half machine. And so there's
Wow.
going to be media companies that are going to be half machine, and then there's other companies that'll be machine companies that'll be half media, because everyone has got to become a content creator now. Do you know what I mean? What I'm saying
Yep.
here?
Yeah.
So you'll find more and more companies in the future who will be they'll be like an old-fashioned TV network where they're pumping out a lot of information that will be of use to their customers as well. Did I explain that well? Do you understand the point that I'm trying to
I
make
think
there?
I think yeah, I think the takeaway is, from an investing standpoint, getting on board with that, finding those companies or sectors that will benefit the most, and participating in it. And I suppose the challenge of the offset for that is how much is already in the price. And Nvidia is a great example, isn't it? The chip maker in the US that's powering a lot of this AI. So. It's very exciting but daunting at the same time. Maybe a bit like when the internet first launched, the World Wide Web in the mid 90s. People weren't quite sure how it was going to fit into the world, and look at it now. It's just ubiquitous. So lots to think about. Really good points, Phil. Thank you.